Okay, hey, hello and welcome to the second Ory community call in 2022. Last call we talked a bit about what happened in the first quarter this year at Ory, in the Ory open source community and also Ory Cloud, the managed service. And the same is going to be this call, so we talk a bit what is going to happen in the next months in Ory and what happened in the last months. And with me on the call, I have Aeneas, Patrick, Andreas, Klaus, and Piotr. And I would ask you to quickly introduce yourselves. So maybe Patrick, you can start from there.
Yes, hi. So I'm working at Ory as a open source maintainer and backend engineer. So my main focus currently is improving Ory Keto, which I'm sure you all know. And I recently also worked on bringing that to the cloud, but more on that in a few minutes. So Aeneas, you want to go next?
Hey, my name is Aeneas. I'm also known as Hackerman. Still developing software every day and happy to shed some light on recent developments in Kratos and other projects, as well as what we're doing with Ory Cloud. And with that, I'm giving to Andreas.
Hi, I'm Andreas Buchsteg. I'm working as head of engineering at Ory, and I'm focusing on bringing our services into the cloud and compliance topics, which is a lot of fun. So I would hand over to Piotr.
Hey, I'm Piotr, or Peter, or PM. I'm working together with the guys here on the Ory Cloud platform and developing the platform itself, making sure that the services that are being developed operate and run smoothly. And with that, I give the mic to Klaus.
Hi, I'm Klaus. I lead product management at Ory now. I joined relatively recently, only a few weeks ago, as a long-time cloud native and SaaS enthusiast coming from Google and SAP Hybris. And I'm super happy to be here and impressed by the Ory community and excited to be part of all this big family. So I think you'll see more of me in the coming weeks and months. And back to Vincent.
Yeah, thanks, Klaus. My name is Vincent. You might know me from the Ory Slack, where I hang out a lot, and I try to help the developer community with using Ory and adoption. Yeah, so I want to start with some rough breakdown what happened in Ory open source in the last months. And as always, there's a ton of new changes and a ton of new features and things that happened. So we will just concentrate on the really high level and give you a quick summary on the biggest things, so you can stay up to date. And I think the biggest change we had this quarter was the graduation of Ory Kratos. So Ory Kratos moved from the sandbox stage to the graduated stage. And maybe Aeneas, you can tell us a little bit more about that, what that means for users and what they can expect in the future.
Yeah, of course, my pleasure. So Ory Kratos is in graduated stage. That means that we're much more confident about the APIs, and we believe that there will be fewer breaking changes in the APIs, for example, the REST APIs. To make sure that that happens, we've done a lot of work in the SDKs and in general also the whole API routing experience, making also sure that the deployments in the cloud as well as deployments in, for example, Docker behave the same way and that there's no differences. Apart from that, there were also a couple of bug fixes, and we still have some things planned for Kratos, of course, in the next couple of months, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. And one other feature that was asked very often in the community was identity metadata. Can you maybe just 1 minute explain what that means?
Yeah, that makes sense. So for metadata, identities have traits, and traits are things that users can change themselves. So for example, it's the email address or the name. But then you often also have application-specific data, like, for example, this user is on pen XYZ, or maybe even some internal nodes on users, like this user is a high-value, customer or something. And basically, it's possible to store this type of information that the user can't edit and can't even see in some cases. You can add that information now into the identity metadata, which is available as a field basically in the Ory identity APIs.
Awesome, great. One other thing that I would quickly highlight is our new Ory Examples Repository. So that's a repository where we will gather all the community-created examples just to have better maintainability down the road and also to give them more exposure. So one thing we did was add a page to the documentation that basically gives you an overview of all examples in the Ory ecosystem. So that's the official Ory examples, but then also a big chunk of community examples and examples that are geared towards self-hosting Ory services. And when you're listening to this, I would ask everyone, if you haven't looked already, have a look at the examples repository, and we will add a lot more from the community to that in the next weeks. And also looking forward to your feedback and your contributions there. And with that, I would give over to Patrick and ask him some questions on Keto. So Ory Keto is our authorization service, and we have done a lot of work in that in the last month. So can you maybe give us a quick breakdown of that, Patrick, please?
Yeah, sure. So in the last few months, we mainly worked on improving and stabilizing the APIs. So working towards also project maturity. So there were just a few basically inconsistencies that we tried to remove, or we're still working on that. So for example, is with pagination, there's some inconsistencies that we'll fix, and then hopefully that will be more future-proof than it is right now. And now, since about a month, we're also working actively on one of the most requested features, which is the subject set rewrites. So in case you're familiar with the Zanzibar paper. So basically that allows any user to define global roles. So for example, you might want to define global rules, so you might want to define that, in a very simple example, you have some hierarchy of files and directories, and you want to specify that if you have if you can view the parent of a certain entity, then you can also view the entity itself. So that you want to define as a global rule that you might want to change atomically in one place instead of adjusting a lot of data that are stored in Keto. And we're now at a state where we have draft PRs for the backend implementation as well as the configuration language accompanying that. So should I go into details about that as well? But anyone who wants to follow, you can just follow the open pull requests.
Yeah, if you could say one or two sentences about the templating language, I think that's very exciting, for me at least as Keto user.
Yeah, at this point, I want to shout out to you, the community, because we had great support in designing this language. We had I don't know, maybe 10 calls with community members who took an hour plus of their time to give us their feedback on how they would like to implement this, how they want to use it. And it's really great, and really thanks a lot for everyone who participated in that. So that helped us a lot in coming to the final draft, the design we have now. Basically, we decided to go with a subset of TypeScript. So a language that's well known, that already comes with some tooling around it, like prettier and unit tests. So actually this config language, yeah, we envision that you write your standard TypeScript code, in case you do know TypeScript, of course, but still it's easy to get used to it, I think, because it's fairly common anyways. And you can then use your standard tools. You can use, for example, unit tests to verify that the configuration you're writing is what you actually want to have. And we want to provide the required mocking libraries and basically ways to get that started. You can use linters. We'll also provide a linter that helps you write the config correctly. And yeah, really excited to find that we came to this solution, and that should be very easy for anyone to adopt.
All right, yeah, thanks for that explanation, Patrick. So we have a third and fourth product. One is Ory Hydra and the other Ory Offkeeper. And for Ory Hydra, we added a new SDK for the Elixir language. But there's also a much bigger implementation effort, or refactoring, or I don't know what you would call it, Aeneas. But so that's basically going back the last 3 months, but also looking a bit in the future. So maybe yeah, you can talk about the Hydra 2.0 issue.
Yeah, of course. So with Hydra 2.0, the big challenge we're basically facing is we want to provide Hydra as a service also in Ory Cloud. And to be able to achieve that, we had to do some changes in the database model. So Hydra's been used in really large deployments, like 1 terabyte plus database sizes. And we've identified just a couple of issues that we need to improve from the database schema. So we've been working really hard to make those changes and develop a new database schema that's also compatible with the old one, and just allows you to scale more and have basically higher scalability, especially if it comes to distributed databases. So we're in the final stages of development for Hydra 2.0 and have also made a lot of progress for Hydra in the cloud. And it will still take a little bit of time to get there, and we'll also have a couple of alpha and pre-releases to make sure that all the migrations work. But yeah, we expect to see Hydra 2.0 this year. And personally, as this is the oldest of Ory's projects, I'm really excited to see it finally come to Ory Cloud, and I think a lot of people have been waiting for it also.
Yeah, and with that, that's a perfect segue into going to the next segment and talking a bit about the changes we made to Ory Cloud in the past 3 months. As you know, there's a constant feedback loop between our open source packages or services and managed service. So all the improvements from the open source get pulled upstream to the Ory Cloud, and the other way around, basically. And one of those services that we offer is the identity service powered by Ory Kratos. And in the last community call, we talked a little bit about the permission service that will be powered by Ory Keto. And with that, I would maybe ask Patrick. So we added this permission service now to Ory Cloud. People can use it right now. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? In what stage is Ory Keto or the permission service of Ory Cloud?
Yeah, sure. So it's generally available. If you already have a Ory Cloud project, then you already have access to Keto APIs right away. So you can just use any client. You can just replace the service by the managed one. The only problem we have there, because we changed a few minor things in the APIs, is that currently the SDK is not compatible because we have a more recent version in cloud running than we have in the open source, the latest stable release. So we're working hard on making that release as soon as possible. which then of course means that all the SDKs will be compatible again. Yeah, and of course, if you don't have an Ory project yet, you should really get one and try it out. But for Keto, we currently only have APIs available. That's due to the fact that we first wanted to really test the integration and how it all works, and ensure that the backend works. And we're, as of speaking now, designing and implementing the UIs for Keto as well. So there will be some basic UIs that will allow you to create, update, list, and delete data. And then starting with the configuration that I mentioned earlier, once that's implemented in the open source, we'll pull it into the cloud as soon as possible. And then, of course, also, allow integrations and UIs and all of that once it's available.
Awesome, that sounds great. But the permission service is only one part of Ory Cloud at the moment. So we also had a lot of improvements to the identity service powered by Ory Cloud. Maybe Aeneas or Andreas, you want to talk about that a little bit, one of you?
Yeah, I can maybe take the first step, and then Andreas, if you have anything to add. So one of the biggest changes that we've introduced to the cloud service and to Ory, the open source ecosystem in general, is that we have now full compatibility between configuration, APIs, database models, between basically what you see on GitHub, the code base, and what you get as an API when you consume it. There was a little bit of work, but it allows us to basically use and configure all the features that you can. For example, the GitHub repositories, you can also do the same thing in the cloud service. And that has been really one of the biggest changes, I would say. Apart from that, of course, we've added things like CORS support to Ory Cloud, added configuration screens for passwordless, and made a ton of improvements to the Ory CLI to be able to manage and automate Ory Cloud projects. We still have a little bit of work to do in specific areas, which we touched on in Q3. But I think in general, it's now really nice to use, especially because you have the option to automate, specific flows just using the Ory CLI and maybe a GitHub action. And I think that's really, really useful. At least I found it always useful with Terraform and tools like Pulumi. So I'm happy that Ory supports this now as well.
So that means I could basically, through an automated action, test my configuration in Ory Cloud and sort of as a staging thing.
You can basically use sort of like GitOps. Basically, you can check in a configuration file and then use the Ory CLI to load it, for example, when someone pushes changes to the main branch on Git. And that just allows you to have also some audit trails of like what's going on with like configuration management in Git. It's what infrastructure teams like PM and Andreas use every day, and what you also use in operations. And I think critical infrastructure like Ory should also support the GitOps approach, and with the Ory CLI, that's possible.
And there's maybe from my side not too much on the feature side to add. It's more really being interested if you as a community are aware of this, so that this is a possibility, and also give us your feedback, because I think it also allows us to have, with the introduction of the CLI configuration support, to have all the features available in open source, making it available to you for Ory Cloud. Because in some areas we maybe lag a little bit behind in the UI support, but you have the full capabilities at your hand, right? And so that would be very interesting also for us, if there's maybe certain things are missing for you also to use it in a production setting, or not allowing you to implement your use case. So that's something we are really interested about.
Yeah, so if you have any feedback, as always, you can take to the GitHub/Ory/Cloud repository and give us feedback there in the discussions or issues, or also on Slack via email. There's a million channels available, but those are the main ones. And so we're very happy for every kind of feedback we get, and it really helps us to build out the Ory Cloud and the Ory ecosystem in general. So two other things I have on my list was the course support and passwordless. Passwordless is kind of a buzzword nowadays, so maybe you can quickly explain what we mean by passwordless. Really, what is passwordless at Ory? Any else, maybe?
Yeah. So passwordless has different ways to solve passwordless. It just means that you're not signing in with a password. So, for example, social sign-in is also some type of passwordless. At Ory, currently, we support passwordless using YubiKeys and FIDO2 WebAuthn. There was actually a recent announcement at Apple WDC that iPhones and in general macOS now supports WebAuthn natively. That really, it allows you to use, for example, Face ID to sign up for a service, or Touch ID to sign up or sign into a service. And by going passwordless with the WebAuthn first, we already support all of these different use cases. We still lack, I think, some guides and documentation around how to set it up correctly, but the technology is there, and I think that's really cool. Of course, there's still topics like SMS registration and login using, just a code and not a password. The same for emails and like magic links. But I think WebAuthn is at least the most future-proof, because as we've seen with SMS, there's always like security considerations that need to be made, and PKI infrastructure is usually much more secure. The certificate is in a device, and it's not bound to your SIM card. But of course, we work towards supporting other flows as well. But that's basically the consideration for why we did WebAuthn first for passwordless, and we'll bring in the other topics a little bit later.
Yeah, I agree completely. SMS seems to me like an outdated standard, but many people still want to offer it or need to offer it. So I think we'll have it down the line. I personally, I think if someone offers me either WebAuthn or SMS, I will take the YubiKey like any day, because it just feels safe. But I might be biased working for a company like Ory. So yeah. So we went over that, and we also made some new examples. A Vue.js example that you can find on the example page that I mentioned earlier. And now also when you log into the console, you console at Ory sh. That's basically console for the managed service. You can find all of the examples also there. Right. So. So let's talk a bit about the future. What is planned for the next quarter of this year? Ines, you want to take this one, or some?
Yeah, I can take this one. So we have many topics planned, and I think I've touched a couple. One is, of course, bringing Hydra to the cloud. That's one of the highest priorities that we have. Because a lot of you in the community are telling us, hey, we would really like to actually consume this from or via the cloud, or we want to have auth2 capabilities without having to run stuff in Kubernetes. So we're working on with a lot of pressure on delivering Hydra 2.0 in a cloud system. And then, of course, the other topic is, as Patrick already said, the user set rewrites, or the so-called Ory permission language, which is a completely new language based on TypeScript. I think it's really well designed. So we spent a ton of time and research and discussions with experts on defining this language. And I think the result is can really be seen, and it's very clear. So we'll also work on delivering this. As Patrick said, there's already some work being done there and pull requests. And then, of course, we have some Ory Katos open topics like the OTP strategies for verification and recovery, being able to do social sign-in from an Android or iOS device, and some other things that have been on a backlog for some time and need to be addressed in the near future. But those are really the most important aspects in Ory open source and Ory Cloud in the next couple of months. Yeah. Andreas, maybe you have also some topics for the infrastructure, like how Ory Cloud's infrastructure will develop over the next quarter, what the goals are from a high level.
Yeah, I can. I think I can split it. So the one aspect, and leave more technical details to Piotr. For one part, we as Ory are focusing on getting certified for ISO and also SOC 2. So there's a lot of work which will go behind the covers, not so much technical, but more organizational, but also security best practice things which we put in place because that also makes it easier for you to trust that your data is in good hands at Ory Cloud. If there's anything specific, so currently our plans are to start with ISO and then go to SOC 2. We know that there are certain industries, certain areas where you are required to have other certifications. So as soon as you can give us the feedback, what you would be interested in, and would help us in the planning process for the future. So that's one aspect of what we are doing as Ory as a company. And then there is also in general, currently our systems are deployed in Europe. We can easily extend this to other regions. We will also do so. But in addition, we are also working on some ways to reduce latency, especially for very frequent operations like session validation and checking, and anything in regards what you maybe have noticed when using the product, where you say it's great, it's working from a functional point, but this would basically hold me back to use it in production. So let us know. We have on our list that we really want to reduce latency massively, but that's a step-by-step process. So I think we are very confident that we know how to do some major reductions, but still it would be interesting. Maybe there's something we don't have currently on our plate or don't focus on. So the earlier you can tell us, the better we can also plan to work on them, also to make Ory ready for a GA at a later point this year. For other technical aspects, I'm not sure, Piotr, if you have any specifics you also want to mention there.
From the most important things you already mentioned, that's all. Maybe with other things that you mentioned, there will be a couple of additional topics that comes with the processes that would need to be implemented within the platform itself. But yes, the performance of the platforms, and the support for different regions are definitely, and the audits are the top 3 things for now for upcoming months for us. And with the different regions in general, if you have some specific needs, feel free to reach out. We are happy to hear, for example, in which region you would like the Ory services to be available the most as well.
Yeah, thanks, guys. One other thing that's more in the background would be the Ory Bug Bounty program. If you are a hacker at HackerOne, you can join that, and but we'll communicate some more about that in the future. It's essentially a managed bug bounty program that invites hackers to test out the security of Ory. And with that, I would move on to a quick Q&A. Or maybe, Thomas, you're just on the call. Maybe you can introduce yourself quickly since you have to drop out in a few minutes, and just, yeah, say what you you wrote in the chat, and then we can let you go.
Yeah, so hello, everyone. I just wanted to mention a couple of things. One is we have, in cooperation with with a company in Munich, a set of instructional, technical videos coming out, along with some examples geared towards a lot of people in the community that are getting started. So that's one thing I want to mention. Then, just as always, Ory is growing, we're expanding, we're looking for good developers. Some of you reach out on DM and want to see if we're hiring. We are. If there's not a job on the website, write to me or Aeneas anyway, and we will get back to you very quickly. And we're also looking to hire a documentation team, and specifically to work on both open source and cloud documentation. So if you're interested or know anyone that's interested in that, yeah, those are the most important things from my view that just above and beyond anything else you said. I have to get on the train, so I'm getting off. So
yeah, all good. Thanks, Thomas, for dropping in anyway. In case you didn't catch everything, we are still hiring. We're still looking for a lot of developers to help us build out our system, and especially for technical documentation, if that's something you enjoy working on in open source and with a highly modern tool set or tool chain. Yeah, so I would go over to the community questions now, and there was two questions on Keto by FanZex. And one would be about an old issue about duplicated tuples, number 292. I don't know, Patrick, if from the top of your head you instantly know what this issue is about. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that?
I wouldn't know the issue number by heart, but I know what the issue is about. So basically, the question is whether duplicate tuples are something Keto should worry about. The point is, when you create tuples, there is no check for uniqueness, because we create a new tuple that is the same content API-wise, but has a different commit timestamp. And currently, that's not really an issue that we, like currently it wouldn't make a difference, but it will impact how Keto behaves once we have what's in the paper called Suitcase. Basically, that's a way to tell whether an event happened before, or like a content update, it's called, happened before the permission got updated. And that's basically, I can't really go into the details because that would take too long. But basically, it's a way to ensure consistency in the API responses and to ensure that Keto never allows something that's not supposed to be allowed. And the point is, you could re-trigger such an update, and you might actually want to use duplicate data to update the commit timestamps and get more recent timestamps. Which would then impact how Keto behaves with those mentioned Suitcase. So we can't really say we disallow this right now, because currently it doesn't affect the whole behavior of Keto, but it might at later points, and that's why it's currently not being taken care of, and it's also kind of left open as an old issue, because it's hard to tell what's actually the feature and what's the bug.
So if I understand correctly, basically when we come to the point of really thinking about how we implement the Suitcase, that will be the time to tackle that issue also. Yes,
then that one will be taken care of, but that's been like, we'll work on that once the rewrites are done. I think the other question was about the rewrites, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I can't really give out a specific timeline. The only thing I can tell is that it won't happen tomorrow. It will definitely take some time to develop that, and especially I'd say the basic feature is kind of there already, but it will need a lot of improvements to ensure the performance is great. It will need some more tests, and yeah, basically we have to ensure that what we ship is actually correct as well. So I'd say it takes at least 1 more month to get that shipped. That's just the minimal time we'll need, but it's probably more.
And is the topic also something where you could use input from the community in any shape or form?
I mean, the feature will be worked on by core maintainers mainly, but I think the community can definitely help us by yeah, getting in touch, giving early feedback. Maybe someone wants to spin it up and see if it works for their use case as well. If there's something we have missed during the design, which I hope we don't, but of course, if the earlier we catch such things, the more we can rely on it being stable in the end. And also, I'd really like everyone to have a look at the config language. We're currently preparing a very simple example that we want to share, and yeah, just see the first reaction of the people, and specifically also the people that I already mentioned worked closely with us to design this.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I'll post the pull request in the chat here in a minute. And yeah, but in general, just have a look at the GitHub/Ory/Keto repository. There you'll find most of these discussions, and yeah, you can always participate and give us feedback. So the next question was from Helio Alves about a Canada region. But I think, Ineas, you already wrote something, or maybe can you repeat that for the...
I think
you don't have to chat. Or Andreas?
I can, yeah. So I was also chatting in the background with Andreas. So basically the question was if we are planning to offer Ory Cloud also in Canada. And our first question was also, and that's where Andreas checked back if it's about legal, so data protection reasons, or latency, and Alves answered, so it's latency. And this is something where we believe once we introduce changes to Ory Cloud to reduce latency, that that even Europe will be a good choice, but maybe not the best. We will still add also, we have in our plans that we have a region in North America. And therefore, it was also important for us to understand if there is any other data protection, let's say, regulation for people in Canada, where they would prefer to have dedicated availability in Canada. For sure, for us right now, as we start just to scale up and make Ory Cloud available in other regions, so we want to be as broad as possible and still provide the best service to you so that it's a really good solution for you in production setups. But yeah, for the US, I think if we have something in the US, we are very confident that it should be good enough for you from a latency perspective.
Thanks, Andreas. Another question from Double Luke for Ory Kratos. Refreshing a session should be possible with the who am I endpoint, but how exactly can this be accomplished? Could not find a reference. Maybe Ineas, you want to take that one? Kratos expert.
I have to check the documentation as well, but we can probably, if you Double Luke, if you post your nick from Slack in the chat, then we can just ping you on Slack and send you to the right place where you need to look.
Fair enough. Okay. And then we have another question from Nuyas for Ory Kratos also. Would it be possible to configure which identity schema to use when doing a registration through OIDC instead of always using the default identity? So basically different schemas for different social logins?
That's a good question. It's currently not possible to do this, but a lot of people have been asking to have multiple schemas and then select which schema to use during registration. We have some ideas how to achieve that. For example, by marking if an identity schema can be chosen for registration or not. And that would then also solve this issue. But at the moment, it's not possible. If you do want to see this, you can create a GitHub issue in Ory Cloud, and then we'll add some ideas how to resolve it, and then can be put on the backlog, either for someone from Ory to pick it up or for the community to pick it up in a PR.
Awesome, yeah. And another one from Helio Alves. Does Ory allow linking social accounts with a username and password account? And if yes, then does it require email validation first?
Yes, we do support that. You can find it by looking for social account linking, I think is the keyword, in the documentation. And email validation is required if you make it required. It's generally a good idea to require it because otherwise it can be used to take over accounts. But it depends a little bit on implementation. The documentation should, however, give enough pointers of what you need to be aware of when you implement this. But if it doesn't work, then feel free to reach out on Slack in the Cloud or Kratos channel to ask about how this works.
All right, thanks. Yeah, one thing I personally want to talk about is, as always, the Ory Summit. So every year we have a community conference for developers that are interested in authentication, cloud security, and all of that. And this year we also have a small in-person event in Munich, but the whole event will also be streamed live. So you can register already at ory.sh/summit. And we also have the call for papers open, I think for 1 or 2 weeks still. And you can apply there. I will drop the link in the chat. If you want to hold a talk. If you're building something with Ory, we'd love to hear more about that, for example. It's always some great sessions for the community. So yeah, check out the Ory Summit. We have another question from iDerpalot. Should linking socials be automatic? It seems this opens up a lot of security risks.
Good question. It does open a lot of security risk, and it should not be automatic. So that's why the linking works like this. It's a user registers an account, and then the user needs to be signed into the account and needs to have a privileged session, and then they can link another social sign-in provider like Google or Facebook. What's not possible is user registers, logs out, registers again, but uses social sign-in, and then the accounts are linked automatically, because that would be a high risk of account takeover. That's why it's important to first authenticate, and then with an authenticated session, do that. So yeah, it's not perfect from a user experience, I would say. It's better than getting hacked. So I guess that's a trade-off we have to make.
I guess security is always a trade-off between user experience and losing all your stuff.
Sure.
So
yeah, for sure.
All right. I think that was it mostly with the questions from the audience. Is there anything you guys want to talk about still? We still have a couple minutes.
I guess there was one more question, Vincent, on YouTube.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah, just now. From Nuyas, do you plan to provide OTP code as two-factor authentication through SMS? There's a PR open, but it's not on the priority list if we have an ETA.
Yeah, it's generally very difficult to give out ETAs for us. It's on a list, but it also still requires like a lot of work and making sure that all the flows, like not specifically from a code perspective, but a review perspective, because it's a very security critical feature, and we need to make sure that all the paths are correct. So it just takes some time, but in general, the OTP strategy is actually on the priority list, even if that specific PR might not be, because it's quite difficult to use magic links in certain cases. So we want to, in general, still provide magic links, but maybe as more like a legacy option, and in general move to OTP codes, because OTP codes are much like they work on mobile. For example, if you reset your account and you receive the email on the mobile phone, you get the code and you can enter it in the browser. Like that it doesn't have to be on the same device, and it's really a much superior strategy than Magic Link. So that's why we want to introduce it in general, and it will also resolve a couple of bugs that we have in Ory Cloud. So it is on a priority list, but we still can't give out an ETA, but we'll try to resolve it this year.
Yeah, thanks. And you mentioned there's some problems with magic links. Can you give us a few details on?
Yeah.
So
the problem with magic links is when you send out the email, it's difficult to choose which host the link should go to. So if you just have one host, it's easy. But if you have like a multi-brand environment, let's say, with like multiple domains, it's sometimes not easy to identify what the correct URL is. The second problem is that magic links, some email clients, they read all the emails and they open the links to see if there are viruses behind them. So what happens is when it clicks the link, it actually invalidates the token it's used to sign the user in or to do the verification flow. And then when the user clicks it, the link is invalidated because we want to prevent replay attacks. There's a couple of solutions to it, but it's just not very pretty and very nice, and it's just easier to get the code and enter the code in the UI, and then it's done and the verification or recovery worked. And the last thing with magic links is that when you have a native app, like for example on your mobile device, and you're on a sign-in screen, you click recover account, you receive an email or an SMS, and it's a link. The problem is the link opened in a browser, and that's not the native app where you start the flow. Instead, it would be better if the native app shows you like a screen, please enter code here. And then, for example, in iOS, you get like a small notification, like your OTP code has arrived, and you tap it and it gets inserted automatically. That's a much nicer experience for mobile apps. So in general, I think OTP is superior to Magic Link, and in many ways, and that's why we want to switch to it for the default settings. Yeah.
Awesome, that makes sense. Yeah. All right, I think we have covered all the questions, and if you have any last words for the community, then feel free to speak up now. And otherwise, I really want to encourage everyone to come to the Ory Summit. As Vincent said, we have some RFPs. So, submit a paper, you're working on something with Ory, even if you think that it's small, it doesn't matter. The summit is really a showcase where the community presents what they do with Ory open source. And it's not so much about what we do with Ory. Of course, we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but it's really to showcase the things that you're working on. And I think it's a really cool format. And since the whole pandemic situation is eased, it will also be in person. And also, of course, digitally streamed, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a great opportunity to meet, people like Klaus or PM, Patrick, myself, Andreas, Vincent in Munich. So come over, come by, and pre-register. It's a great event. I'm sorry, I lost my sound there. Yeah, awesome. That's great. I would say check out the Ory Summit website, and we'll soon be in touch with you with more information on that. And with that, I would say thanks everyone for listening in, and thank you all for joining on the call. And hopefully see you soon in the next one.
See you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.